Hi, everyone.
Hi, Maria Pia.
Hi.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Lab's Demo Day. We are thrilled to have over 300 people from all around the world register for today's event. Before we begin, here are a few housekeeping items. These events are being broadcast live on YouTube, and the recording will be available afterwards. Check the Lab's website soon after the event for accessing the recording and the presentations we are showing today. Today, we'll hear from climate finance innovators who have participated in the lab program in 2023. They'll pitch their solutions to drive private climate investments in emerging economies. A Q&A segment will follow each pitch. If you have a question, you don't need to wait until the presentation is over. Please type it in the Zoom Q&A tool, not the chat box. Find the Zoom Q&A tool at the bottom of your screen. You can also upvote other people's questions. We aim to answer all questions either verbally or in writing. Each team has a designated person who will be answering questions in real time. However, due to time constraints, we may not be able to answer all questions during the event. If your questions is unanswered, the team will follow up with you via email. And please now join me in welcoming our hosts today, Barbara Buchner and Vikram Wedge from Climate Policy Initiative, the lab's secretariat. Barbara is CPI's Global Managing Director, and Vikram is a Senior Advisor. Barbara, Vikram, take it away.
Well, thank you so much. And hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for the 4th Lab Demo Day. It's such a pleasure to have you all here with us. And it's always very exciting just to showcase the innovative sustainable investment ideas that climate finance entrepreneurs around the world have come up with during the Lab Incubation Program. Also very pleased to be co-hosting again this year with Vikram Wedge, CPI Senior Advisor and a very good friend and colleague. And Vikram has been involved with the lab since its very inception, so he knows it very well. Hi, Vikram.
Hi, Barbara, and hello, everyone online. It is indeed my pleasure to be here with you today, and we have the full history on the lab together, Barbara, and I'm really looking forward to showcasing the lab class of 2023 with you. Today, we are very proud to present a cohort of innovative financial instruments that focus on a variety of high-impact areas such as agriculture, conservation, housing, and climate adaptation. And personally, I think this is one of the strongest lab classes ever, with over $100 million in funding committed so far already, which is pretty impressive for out of the starting gate. And together, we think these instruments could mobilize even more, perhaps even reaching closer to $800 million in climate investments in the long term.
Yeah, I fully agree with you, and it's well noted, Vikram. But I think what we need to do today as well, in order to catch the attention of everyone on this webinar, is to contextualize these figures. And I think we all know that we are not fully on track of where we need to be. Limiting warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius requires massive global investments, particularly from the private sector. And that's obviously something which is also very close to my heart, because one of the things CPI is most known for is our analysis of global climate finance flows. We have been tracking global public and private investments into climate action for more than a decade. And our latest report found that annual tracked climate finance increased to about $650 billion in 2019-2020, with early estimates suggesting that 2021 climate finance flows amount to at least $850 billion. But little spoiler alert, in a few weeks, we will be publishing our new global climate finance landscape with some exciting new figures for 2021 and 2022. So stay tuned for that. But what I can tell you today is that the direction of travel is positive. But of course, and no surprise, we are falling far short of the needs. There is still a significant gap between current flows and what's needed for a successful low carbon, resilient and just transition. And while there is no definitive estimate of the investment required to achieve global climate and sustainable development goals, it is clear that the incremental increases that we've seen over the past decade will not be sufficient. We will need at least $4.3 trillion in annual finance flows by 2030 to avoid the worst impacts of climate change.
That's right, Barbara. We can't reach the trillions of dollars in investment that is needed by involving only governments and philanthropies. Private capital is critical to this endeavor. And that's why the lab was created in 2014, to identify and develop, ultimately help accelerate innovative financial mechanisms that can attract such private capital into both climate change mitigation and adaptation in developing economies. The idea, of course, is to use relatively small amounts of grants and concessional capital to grow these into self-sustaining instruments that can create that significant impact at scale while achieving commercial viability, because that's really ultimately the pathway to success in mobilizing that capital. And the lab's success itself is based on 3 key pillars. 1, strong collaboration between the public and private sectors. 2, openly sourcing concepts globally. And three, having a powerful network of financiers and policymakers to help move these solutions into action. And so far, I'm happy to say that it's been working well. The group, this particular group that we are presenting today, represents the 9th annual lab cohort that has worked on ideas to tackle these climate change related issues.
Yeah, it has been working well, and the lab's impact numbers demonstrate it. What you can see on this slide is that lab ideas have mobilized over $3.5 billion since the lab launched almost 10 years ago. And this is largely due to investments from members and observers of the lab, who I always like to call the backbone of the lab, who committed $1.2 billion. And as a result, lab ideas attracted 3 times more resources from other investors. So in total, 85 public and private investors invested in 36 lab ideas that have been able to attract any finance for a climate mobilization rate of 75%. And I think this is pretty significant if you also compare it to other incubators and accelerators.
Yes, and this is because the lab creates a pipeline of viable ideas that then successfully mobilize additional financing, including the private investments we talked about. We'll soon hear from the lab entrepreneurs of 2023 who will pitch the opportunities that tackle some of the most challenging sectors in climate investment. They've been working on innovative financial solutions to address the climate change issues in emerging markets, focusing on energy, on agriculture, infrastructure, and social enterprise. We have 6 ideas to pitch today, quick snapshots on the screen, representing the latest and we think the greatest innovative approaches to sustainable investment available today.
Yes, the latest and greatest, fully agree with that. And these ideas have the potential to mobilize nearly $800 million in the long term. So today, to get them off the ground, we are presenting immediate fundraising opportunities split between grants, concessional, and commercial capital. And at the end of the presentation, we will send you all a poll where you can express interest in learning more about specific instruments. So please stay with us and reach out if you see any potential for collaboration. Ultimately, we need you to help turn these great ideas into action. But with that, let's move to the first idea of the day. Let's get to the substance of our discussions. The Impact Financing Facility for Climate Action Solutions, which was developed under the Lab's India regional program. And it's my pleasure to have here with us Vibha Tiwari-Sharma, Impact Finance Lead at Willgrow, who will walk us through their scalable, gender-inclusive solution for innovation-based social enterprises and their end users. Over to you, Vibha.
Thank you, Barbara. Hello, everyone. I'm Vibha, presenting to you the Impact Financing Facility for Climate Action Solutions. I'm a chartered accountant and I'm a CFA charter holder, and I lead impact financing at Willgrow. Willgrow is an Indian not-for-profit organization and an incubator in India. We believe in the power of innovations to cause meaningful, disruptive impact. We incubate innovation-based social enterprises working in the 4 sectors of climate action, agriculture, gender inclusion, and health. We have a solid track record of about 22 years, incubating around 400 enterprises till date, and have provided support in the form of various types of seed funding, mentoring, technical assistance, including market linkages and access to finance. We have big plans to scale in the next 5 years, and this facility is crucial for us to achieve our impact targets and get more finance to our enterprises. You can see our core team here, who are in-house experts in agriculture, climate action, technology, gender, and finance, bringing in a cumulative experience of over 100 years. We are a team of 40+ full-time employees committed to impact and executing at scale, and we are about 60% women. A crucial question is why this facility? In our experience working with the innovation-based social enterprises, we saw that in spite of being product ready, they face challenges in scaling due to unique business models, longer time to develop innovations and take it to market, difficult market segment, and hence a longer gestation period and time to profitability. I will illustrate this through an example of one of our enterprises that developed hyperspectral imagery or to monitor crop fields using drone-based system to detect early signs of pest infestation in crops. If detected late, it could mean using a lot of pesticides or losing the crop. This technology, when used correctly, could reduce the amount of pesticides used by farmers, reducing the input cost and improving the food safety. This technology also provided precision farming inputs and market linkages to improve the farmers' income significantly. However, post the product development, they faced challenges in getting funding, and as it was a very difficult customer segment, the farmers, and they did not have the conventional assets or financials to attract capital. Wilgrow enabled a $30,000 loan to this enterprise, which allowed them to provide market linkage and onboard more farmers for precision farming. The trust we showed and the credit history also helped them get other debt and equity funding. And today they are able to work with more than 19,000 farmers as opposed to 1,000 when we started. And they have brought more than 50,000 acres of land under sustainable agriculture in 2 years. This is the power of innovation, what this facility, as what we are proposing, will be able to produce. The facility focuses on such early stage innovation-led enterprises in the crucial time to avoid valley of death by using high risk-taking grants to mitigate risk for the financial institutions and enable access to debt finance for social enterprises as well as their end customers. Including the end customers and bringing a value chain approach is critical to ensure technology adoption. We believe funding is not enough, and our facility will support the enterprises to strengthen their processes through customized technical assistance. All of this will help build the credit history, not only for the enterprises and the end customers, but also for the technology and the product itself. So this is how the facility will work. You can see on the left side of the diagram, we will be raising high-risk taking philanthropic capital for risk mitigation. We will enter into partnerships with financial institutions, as you can see in the center part of the slide, and the institutions will lend to the enterprises based on this risk mitigation like guarantees. In addition, we also have a technical assistance facility funded through the grants. And this facility will do a deep dive into the business model, into the product of the social enterprise, and provide customized technical assistance support to them, onboarding subject matter experts for the same. So we have run a couple of pilots on this in the last couple of years. I talked about one of the enterprises that we worked with. This was through this pilot that we ran with Caspian Debt. Our pilot has evaluated enterprises with the most appropriate and suitable alternate credit appraisal methods and has done collateral-free lending backed by guarantees. We've had more than 3x of direct financial leverage and a 10x of follow-on funding for these enterprises, along with growth in revenue and impact. Our end customer pilot has also seen good success, and this pilot focuses on livelihood generation and more so livelihood generation focused on women. Overall, both these pilots, we've not had any defaults and our guarantee pool is intact. Each of our enterprises are unique in the way they create impact, but some of the common metrics that we will be tracking are, for example, tons of carbon emissions avoided, tons of waste recycled, liters of water saved, land brought under sustainable agriculture, the number of end users benefited, especially women livelihoods generated, as well as the capacity building of social enterprises. In terms of our implementation timeline, in the immediate future, we are going to focus on setting up a legal structure that will be most conducive to scale and also pilot other instruments eventually, while also working on fundraising for the guarantees and exploring avenues to make this facility operationally sustainable. We are very pleased to also mention here that we are going to be supported by Convergence in this endeavor through a design grant. Post the structuring period, we will go into implementation and scaling and including other instruments as well. We are looking to immediately raise in the next 6 months to 1 year, about $4 million in philanthropic capital towards guarantees and technical assistance. And we will leverage the guarantees through partnerships with financial institutions to get $10 million in commercial capital. We are very thrilled to share our idea here, and we are actively looking for partners to collaborate and make a meaningful impact on climate. Please reach out to us. Our contact details are on the slide. We have also conducted an in-depth research on blended finance for social enterprises. This brings out insights which have helped us formalize the idea for this facility. We urge you to read this, which is available on our website. Our CEO Srinivas can answer questions in chat, and I'm open to taking questions right now. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you so much, Viva, and thanks for giving us a really good overview of this idea. Again, I think very strong track record, very strong team, and I think the fact that you just managed also to get already this design funding from Convergence certainly highlights that this is something that everyone thinks has a huge potential to scale. So this is an investment opportunity. I hope everyone has listened very carefully to you. 4 million in the next 6 to 12 months that really could help getting this to scale. I can see that there have already been a couple of questions that Srinivas has already answered. So let me just pause here and see whether anyone has other questions in the Q&A section. At the moment, I can't see any questions. Maybe as I'm just waiting for someone else to kind of add additional questions, I can ask you a question, because I think, again, for me, the big issue that came up from your presentation here is really kind of the potential and the need for scale. So I'd love just to hear from you, what are your plans to scale up the facility in more detail?
Right. So thank you very much for that question, right? So when we look at scale, I think we're looking at it from multiple perspectives, right? One is, when we work with the enterprises, so while immediately we are looking to target, enterprises at a very early commercialization stage, right? Where the value of each financial access is going to be, relatively small. But as we include more enterprises and these enterprises start to scale a little bit, I think this value can also go up, right? That's one. Second is inclusion of other geographies in this as well. Because this model is such a simple model, right? It is easy to understand and fairly, we can execute it, in multiple geographies. It could be in India, it could be in Africa, right? So that is another way in which we are going to bring in scale. The third is having more and more sectors to be added within this, right? So while we are looking at climate action, but within climate also, we have a very wide range of sectors, right? So adding more and more will also bring in the scale. As and when because this is an evergreen pool of funds for the guarantee, as we keep on revolving this money, as the loan gets repaid, we keep on revolving the same money. That will also add, in terms of the scale that we are looking for.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. There's 2 quick questions. And again, I apologize, you're not going to be able to call on everyone, but as Julia said at the beginning, we are going to get back on all your questions. So we have 1 question from Victoria Plutarch on, just thinking to share the story and whether you can say a little bit more about the gender dimension of your work. So particularly what gender-centered livelihoods are. And then I think the second questions from Niga are how you ensure sustainability of the SMEs as businesses. And I think these are the 2 we will be able to take, and then we can you can reply as a team to them, to other ones that come up.
Sure. Thank you very much. So in terms of gender, right? So I'll talk about how we are looking at gender. So for us, the gender component comes in 3 ways, right? One is if these enterprises are led by women. That is a very key way in which we look at gender, enabling access to finance to women-led businesses and providing them with technical assistance so that they can scale. That is a crucial step. The second is if the products are benefiting women in general, right? So for example, if we're working with an enterprise that has made climate-friendly, biodegradable sanitary napkins, right? So there again, we have a very clear gender angle in terms of the users of the product. The third is the livelihood generation. So can the products of the social enterprise enable livelihood generation for women? So again, I'll take the example of one of our social enterprise, or a couple of examples, right? So one, we have a solar powered dryer, which the women farmers use to dry whatever excess produce that they grow in the field, right? Like tomatoes become sun-dried tomatoes, mushroom becomes dried mushrooms, right? And these products are then sold to the, through market linkage services that are provided by the startup itself, right, which gives them an additional stream of revenue and also helps avoid wastage. So there's a livelihood generation angle there. Second example would be of another social enterprise that is making solar-powered silk weaving machine and silk spinning machine. Again, these machines are predominantly used by women, and now because they are not dependent on electricity and are, compact in size, they can be kept in their homes and used as per their convenience to weave the fabric, which again adds a livelihood angle to the women over there, right? So that's how we are looking at gender in this particular facility, right?
Thank you so much. I actually have to unfortunately stop you because now we have more and more questions, but we have still a number of other instruments we want to
answer the question on the sustainability in the chat.
Really appreciate that. And again, thanks so much for all your work, and thanks for all the questions.
Thank you. It was wonderful being here and wonderful working with you all.
Thank you so much, Viva. But with that, Vikram, over to you.
Great. So that was great. Next up, we have the Climate Resilient Landscape Finance, representing the lab's East and Southern Africa regional program. John T. Rollins, Head of Sustainability at Platcorp, will walk us through their groundbreaking idea that is designed to help African conservancies address challenges to sustainable and resilient land management practices. So the virtual floor is yours, John T. Take it away.
Thank you, Vikram. Much appreciated. Good evening, everyone from Nairobi. As mentioned, my name is John T. Rollins, and I'm the lead on the Climate Resilient Landscape Finance project, and I'm going to tell you a bit about what we're doing here. So to start off, who are we? We're a consortium of 4 complementary organizations working together to build as much impact as we can across African ecosystems. Platcorp is an impact-focused African asset manager focusing on microfinance. We have partnered with Conservation Capital, a boutique advisory firm, the Conservation International, a global conservation NGO and thought leader, and Dasco Limited, our technical conservation and land management consultancy partners, to implement this project effectively from all angles. So what is the challenge we're trying to address? Some of the most immediate challenges to climate and nature health is around biodiversity decline, and particularly in southern Kenya, where we're beginning with our first site, land fragmentation and conversion to agriculture has led to roughly a 60 to 70% decline in wildlife numbers since 1977. Moreover, the lack of skills and capital for sustainable land management have resulted in a situation where we have roughly 80 to 90% funding shortfalls needed to meet conservation requirements and needs up to 2030. So how do we address this? CRLF, or the Climate Resilient Landscape Finance Facility, is an innovative, concessional, and evergreen debt facility catalyzing sustainable, climate-resilient land management in and around African conservancies. And how do we do this? We do this by growing or enhancing land value for the beneficiaries, the landowners, and nature. And what this means is that currently land rates are currently being leased at roughly $60 per hectare. And through innovative and sustainable methods, including tourism uplift, sustainable agriculture in the periphery of conservancies, sustainable livestock management, carbon and biodiversity crediting, we're confident that we can reach at least a 50% increase in land value, which will be perpetuated and help us to incentivize sustainable land management and for landowners to commit their land towards conservation and climate resilient management. So how does the vehicle work itself? There's simply three facilities in which we operate. So the first is the microfinance facility operated by Platcorp, who have over $250 million in assets under management in microfinance across East Africa and Southern Africa, providing lease-backed loans at concessional rates to landowners with incentives and innovative social and environmental covenants to help them realize their development of sustainable MSMEs on the ground, as well as to build sustainable livelihoods in the regions. Then Conservation International will be managing the private debt facility, providing growth financing directly to conservation enterprises or conservation land management companies in order to help them grow their revenue pool through those innovative processes that we discussed in the last slide. And then lastly, a technical assistance facility that helps us to support growth of these enterprises and unlock access to carbon and biodiversity opportunities, and ultimately de-risking the investments in the other two facilities by building and ensuring that the capacity on the ground is there in every single site that we operate. So in terms of impact, this is very much an impact-first vehicle where we're aiming to uplift communities and build resilience whilst also restoring biodiversity and natural carbon sinks, addressing some of the biggest global challenges that we're facing. We're looking at, just from our initial sites, to look at about 92,000 hectares of biodiverse land protected and restored, 2,000 to 3,000 MSMEs supported and developed through technical assistance and loans. We look at sequestering over 5 million tons of carbon over a 30-year life cycle, generating over $70 million of benefits directly and indirectly to the rural landowners and surrounding communities, and ultimately leveraging 3 to 5x in private capital through the innovative capital structure that we've employed. So the implementation timeline, we're currently in the go-to-market phase where we're looking at, we've developed and we've signed an MOU with Conservation International to develop this and take this to market. We're also looking to currently secure anchor investors, both on the philanthropic and the impact investment side, while also establishing our SPV in order for us to implement this effectively across multiple regions. Then heading into the first phase, in 2024, we'll be administering our first loans, both to MSMEs and landscape management companies from the microfinance and the private debt facilities, as well as implementing the various TA options, which will allow us to shortlist our phase 2 rollouts. And then going into 2025, we'll be developing and rolling this out across multiple sites, and to expand our capital pool, become less, taking on less concessional capital and growing the vehicles across multiple regions. Some of our immediate funding opportunities for the first sites that we're looking at account for roughly $12 million. However, we're looking to get to multiple sites within the initial 5 to 10 years of this project, which we believe the fund can grow anywhere between $50 million plus. From a concessional debt standpoint, a total of $6 million, we've raised about $300,000 to date and had it committed. From a commercial debt side, for the microfinance facility, we've got about $500,000 of subordinated debt committed. We're looking to raise another $1 million for the catalytic capital and grant financing to capitalize our first loss tranche. And then we're looking to capitalize our $2 million grant facility to assist with technical assistance and grow the capacity on the ground and de-risk our commercial investments to grow this capital pool. So thank you very much. We're very excited to take this journey with you, and please feel free to ask us any questions and highlight any specifics. Otherwise, you can reach us on these email addresses as you see on this slide. Thank you.
Sorry, I guess I wasn't muted. What I was saying was, let me repeat. Thanks, John D. This was great. I'm looking at the Q&A panel to see if there are any questions from the audience. But while we wait for them to digest what you said, let me ask you a question. Actually, I have two questions, but let's start with the impact one first. So primarily a debt vehicle is what you have described, right? With multiple different types of if you will, capital in the stack, grant, concessional funds, commercial capital, or catalytic capital and commercial capital. And the impact first space hasn't been really successful in attracting returnable capital, so to speak, right? Which few exceptions, but broadly, and especially at the scale you want to get to, how do you plan to overcome this? I mean, what is your risk mitigation strategy, perhaps, to protect impact investors?
Thanks, Vikram. And I think that's, you've come right to the heart of our proposal here. We have a number of risk mitigation components that we've developed over the last 1 to 2 years, including in the capital side of things. We're looking at, so from the one side, the technical assistance facility helps us to de-risk operations on the ground to ensure that investees have the financial literacy and capacity to understand their ability to absorb and repay debt, and provide us with active feedback on this regularly. In addition to that, the first loss tranche and the concessional capital coming in for philanthropies and impact first investors provides us with significant mitigation, whereby after initial years, somewhat 3 or 4 years of initial operation, our retained earnings would allow us to continue operating with a larger pool of revolved funds and ultimately continue to de-risk through a growing first loss tranche. So both on the capital side and the operational side, and then having worked on this, developing this concept over more than 2 years now with such a well-established team on the ground who are very familiar both with the land management dynamics as well as the business dynamics of tourism, of livestock, of conservation and carbon, we're confident that these revenues can comfortably repay over and above. And this is part of our IP, where we've developed this extensive due diligence process for all of our investees as well.
Great. And that, I think, segues into a question now that we have one from, Jan Corfy. Hi, Jan. John, thanks for joining. Jan wants to know, and I'm trying to paraphrase the longer question, what are the revenue streams that you think, perhaps from the land use activities that are expected to be available in your the MSMEs that you are targeting? How do they repay these commercial loans? What is your offer at launch, right? And more importantly, an add-on question, if you will, are you planning to monitor the performance, particularly on the biodiversity, given that these are conservancies and the CO2 goals?
Yeah, great question, Jan. So to your first question, how these MSMEs will see to repay any kind of debt that they'll take on, this has been modeled an extent. And we've used existing kind of microfinance options to base this on. So this isn't new what we're trying to do, but packaging it at scale is what we're offering to incentivize landowners to take longer term leases with conservancy management companies. And this lease revenue is the one that is guaranteed through a combination of tourism and livestock and other activities on the ground that are happening. And then that is what is used to pay off these concessional microfinance products over time. And then in terms of monitoring CO2 and biodiversity goals, over the last couple of years, we've developed quite an extensive impact measurement and monitoring framework where our teams from Dascot and Conservation Capital and Conservation International will be working extensively. We've established baselines in some of our initial conservancies, and we can show how changes happen over time. And as part of the carbon side, we're working with independent project developers where CI Ventures have set up a large carbon project in the Masai Mara, for the One Mara Carbon Project, where we intend to contribute through this project directly, and then they would have third-party measurement and monitoring of carbon outcomes as well.
Perfect. There are a couple of questions, good ones, from JJ Carrasco on ROI for investors and on the TA facility, but let's just let you answer those in the chat, and we will turn it back to Barbara to take us on to the next instrument. Sorry, we're out of time, but thanks again, Jonty. This is great, and good luck. Bye. Over to you, Barbara.
Great, thanks so much, and thanks also from my side, Jonty. Great work here. But yes, now let's learn about the social infra ventures, which is an affordable housing solution addressing really both the gender and climate issues in Africa. So it's my pleasure to welcome Bia Kelly, who is the Senior Business Development Manager at Cardano Development. So Maria, the floor is yours. Kent, I think you're still muted.
My apologies. Thanks, Barbara.
Wonderful.
Good day, everyone. My name is Maria Pia. I'm coming to you from Cardano Development, which is an incubator and fund manager. And we provide innovative solutions for emerging and frontier markets in the finance sector. And we have teamed up with Social Infra Ventures, led by Daniel Font and Anna Villaruby, who you will see on the left of the screen. And Dania and Anna have been working together since 2008. And we have a team in Morocco supporting Dani and Anna, a strong team of 10. And to date, they have invested 122 million euros and provided over 5,300 affordable housing units in Morocco. I think it will come as no surprise that the housing situation across Africa is quite precarious. But what you may not know is that over half of the population growth globally by 2050 will happen in Africa. And the supply of climate resilient and affordable housing in the region is very low, and we need to step up. We will be targeting the low and middle income population who are heavily reliant on the informal rental sector. A lack of access to housing finance is also a big issue, and unsafe living environments which disproportionately affect women. So what can SIV do? What will we do? One of the core aspects of our initiative is gender and climate, and we have been helped tremendously by the lab over the past year, working out how to incorporate gender and climate ideally into our solution. We will incorporate the 15-minute city concept, starting in Morocco. All of our houses will be certified, and we will be working with IFC, using their Building Resilience Index and also EDGE certification. And again, a strong focus on gender. We want to ensure that we can provide safety for women and girls, also access to opportunities, be it in terms of mobility, employment, or education. Okay, here we have a very simplified overview of our structure. So on the left, you see Civ DevCo, which develops the affordable housing units and sells to the market. And Civ DevCo also develops units which it will sell to Civ RentCo. Civ RentCo will then manage and rent out those units. And in the end, those units will be listed using a REIT or a real estate investment trust. Impact. So in Morocco, we will be developing 22,000 centrally located green and climate resilient affordable housing units. And in doing so, we will house 104,000 people. 25% of those will be through rental. And we will ensure that at least 30% of these units are owned by women or at least co-owned. We also aim to reduce CO2 emissions by 3,800 tons per year. And we will create 184,000 jobs. As I touched upon earlier on, social infrastructure is key to what we do. So we will be developing childcare facilities, clinics, libraries, schools, etc. A lot of people ask, how does it work timing-wise, especially as an investor? It's always good to know. So in the first 6 months, what has happened in the past with Social Infra Ventures is that the land is secured, the agreements are secured, the community and technical consultations take place, and the zoning and social assessments are finalized. Then within 1 year, it's possible to negotiate the construction finance, and then the construction begins. In years 2 to 3, we deliver and we can start the operations. And then in year 4, we list. So although we speak primarily about Morocco to date, we do have a Pan-African strategy and a Pan-African footprint also. So in phase 1, indeed, we begin with Morocco. And in phase 2, we move to Senegal, Cote d'Ivoire, and in phase 3, Tunisia and Ghana. And important to note that the Civ team already has a lot of experience in all of these countries. So the key considerations for us in going to country is number 1, the real GDP growth, also the population growth, the housing deficit, the per capita income, the private and public sector relationships, the competitive edge, and the rate of urbanization at that point. The fundraising opportunity. So we're delighted to share that we have already secured quite a lot of funding. The rental facility is fully funded at $30 million US. The mezzanine fully funded at $35 million US. The preferred equity, 15 million is our goal, and we have secured 10 million, and we're now working on the remaining 5 million. But for us here today, our priority to discuss with you is our urgent need. So as you're all aware, I am sure, on the 8th of September in Morocco, there was a devastating earthquake. And our colleagues and stakeholders in Morocco have asked us to speed up the process. So we are looking for 400,000 million in grants to support us with our working capital and operational expenses, and also equity. So our aim for the equity is 10 million. We have dispersed 2 million. We have 5 committed and is going through finalization. And there's an opening for a further 3 million still outstanding at the moment. So if this is of interest to you, or you would like to know anything else about Social Infra Ventures, please don't hesitate to reach out now or later on. And I will hand over to my colleagues, Daniel and Anna, who will answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mary-Kelly. And again, thanks for the great overview. And I think, again, also just the fact how much funding you have managed to secure just shows really that investors believe in this real opportunity. I feel you've been very strong in terms of, again, track record, but also the focus both on impact. And I think it's just, for me, fantastic to see how you have really operationalized this lens on gender and climate in your work. So, and you have a clear long-term plan, but yes, let's focus on the fundraising opportunities here. Again, I think everyone knows how urgent the needs are, particularly to speed up operations in Morocco. So I obviously do hope that your plans have not been affected too much by that devastating earthquake, and everyone is fine there. So I think that's something you obviously can bring into your questions. But I see that there is an open question, but actually it's still, I think, for the previous instrument. So let me maybe then just ask a question again on my own while we are waiting for new questions to come. And I think I was very intrigued just by your plans around issuing the REIT. And so I just would love to hear a little bit more on how you're planning to do that, and if you have any alternative plans to kind of draw back on in case it should not work as has been planned for now. And now I know we have the whole team on here, so whoever wants to come in, it's great to have you all here.
I think the question, my name is Daniel, I'm CEO of Social Infra Ventures. Related to the point on the earthquake, as Maria Pia mentioned, we are shifting our pipeline to the south. This was a request from the accredited entity, that is the Attijari Wafa Bank of Morocco, that suggested that we should start investing in that region. And just 2 days ago, the King of Morocco, with the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Housing, has implemented the third social housing scheme in Morocco. Then it's going to be accelerated the investments in that region. The problem that we are having is that there's no problems. We are not a company that is going to reconstruct, but is a company that is going to provide homes to the displaced people. Most of these people come from rural areas, and winter is coming, and then these families from rural areas will come to cities like Marrakesh and secondary cities around Marrakesh. Then the idea of SA is to provide homes to these people. Related to the question of the rate, you have to understand that 75% of the homes that we are constructing are for selling to individuals and vulnerable groups, and only 25% is going to be rented. The idea is this 25% of units, 5,500 units, will be listed in the Casablanca Stock Exchange. And as an alternative, if we do not succeed on attracting investors on the rental platform, just to let you know, we are already on the discussion with many institutional companies in Morocco, as pension funds and insurance companies, to take our platform. But as you know, we've been granted by the Green Climate Fund PPF facility, and one of the work streams that we are implementing is to study the attractive or the capacity of absorption of a REIT of this kind on Morocco. It's going to be the first time that the REIT of affordable residential homes is listed in the market. It's the first time that a company like this has an H certification, level 2, requested by the Green Climate Fund, and it's also the first time that a company or portfolio of assets is rated rated A+ on Building Resilience Index.
Great, that's super helpful. Thanks so much, Danielle. And again, I think lots of first times, but I think lots of kind of learning from other experiences, which is great. And thanks so much. I saw that Frederick has also already answered another question that we have. I think we have time for one more question. Then I'm happy to see Abhishek here to talk about a little bit, I think, the links between the Wilgrow work. So, and just seeing whether there is any links that you see maybe between the work that Wilgrow is doing in India around social enterprises through, to address that also more with affordable housing and green building materials, and anything that you think Cardano development or that the team here could facilitate or like replicate some of the lessons that you have.
Well, one of the main concerns or the main strategies that social environmentalists has is we always use local materials. We don't bring materials or technologies from abroad. This is just for enhancing the SMEs and construction materials in the country. And basically, it's because of, as you know, Morocco is an earthquake area. Just in 2004, another earthquake happened, but in the north of Morocco, and all the construction materials and policies in place are related to the local construction materials in Morocco. But it's true that implementing level 2 of 8 certifications, we need to implement solar panels in our buildings, and this is something that we are going to study how we can implement with implementing or working with local construction companies in Morocco to provide these materials, because it's something that is not so easy to get, and we have estimated that the increase of cost of these homes with this new technology of panels is going to increase 600 euros per unit. That is why it's something that we need to investigate and to reduce to be still affordable.
Thank you so much. Well, again, I think there's lots of lessons to be learned, and certainly as the lab, we are trying also to make sure that we will be like drawing lessons from one continent to the other and making sure that we can replicate the things. But thanks so much to the whole team, Pia, Danielle, and Anna, and Frederick in the chat. And with that, I'm going to hand over again to Vikram.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Barbara. And yeah, what a timely and impactful sort of activity and engagement with that last instrument. Fantastic. But now let's hear from the Catalyst Climate Resilience Fund, which is an impact fund and accelerator supporting pre-seed tech startups that are building a climate resilient future in Africa. And they are a leading fund in this area, because we are also very happy to announce that they recently reached their first close at $8.5 million US dollars. And so for this, we welcome Maëlys Carraro, Managing Partner of the Catalyst Fund. Over to you, Maëlys.
Thank you, Vikram. And hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. So, Vikram already said it all, but my name is Maëlys. I'm the Managing Partner of the Catalyst Fund. And Catalyst Fund is an impact fund and accelerator backing early stage tech ventures building a climate resilient future in Africa. I'm joined in this call, you may see her later, by our Chief Investment Officer, Karen Waitaka. And together with our third partner, Maxime, we're a team of strong emerging market investors and operators. I was a founder myself before of a startup. And collectively, we worked with nearly 150 startups across Africa and other emerging markets for over a decade. And our team of investors, but also strong venture builders, based between Nairobi, Dakar, and Lagos, is on a mission to tackle the climate crisis by placing early bets in disruptive innovations. So many of you in the room already know this, but Africa is the most vulnerable continent to climate change, in spite of contributing less than 4% to global emissions. The AFDB actually estimates that 50% of Africa's GDP nearly is vulnerable to extreme climate patterns, and almost 350 million people are at risk of food insecurity on the continent because of climate change impacts. Just this past year, nearly 2 million Africans were displaced because of Cyclone Freddy. You might have seen in the news in Malawi, Mozambique, in Zimbabwe, and that was the most powerful cyclone ever recorded. However, a story that is often untold is that Africa is a powerful hub for climate innovation. It has a growing young population, abundant natural resources, rich biodiversity, vast arable lands, and a very dynamic tech innovation ecosystem that have had the luxury to be at the forefront for the past 7 years. So all this make it a very prominent leader in innovating for climate solutions for a low carbon future and for adaptation to make 1.5 billion people more resilient. So to me, this is a very big opportunity, and I'm not the only one recognizing this. For those of you that were at the Africa Climate Summit in Nairobi in September. But it's also important to recognize that barriers still remain high for African innovation to reach its full potential. Investors still lament lack of investable pipeline, and the funding for climate adaptation and resilience specifically still stands at barely 8% globally and just 2% coming from the private sector. Even in Africa alone, I think the gap is at nearly 40 billion a year, so 579 billion by 2030. And this is especially dire in the valley of death, so the early stage phase between product and scale for early stage innovations. This is exactly why Catalyst Fund exists. So our goal is to invest in tech-enabled solutions that help communities manage risks, adapt livelihoods, and build long-term resilience to climate change impacts for these communities. And we do so with a unique approach, tried and tested now for nearly a decade, to plug these gaps. So we invest early. We're usually the first institutional check into a company, with checks at around $200,000. We follow on. So we plan to follow on the best companies at seed and Series A to continue to try to fill that valley of death gap between product and scale. And we combine capital with human capital investment, which is what we call venture building. And it's integrated into our investment ticket and a critical part of making sure ventures succeed. We also put impact at our core and invest with a thesis-driven and ecosystem building approach to make sure that our work not only benefits our own companies, but stands to benefit and inspire other founders that want to tackle these issues in Africa. Our thesis really focuses on 3 pillars. So we invest in solutions such as insurance, climate data, or emergency payments that we classify as fintech for climate resilience. But we also look at sectors that improve livelihoods, for example, regenerative agriculture, aquaculture, land restorations, and essential services in a warmer world, like water management, healthcare, and waste management. Our view is that every sector of the economy will need to adapt to the impacts of climate change. And so this diversified approach will really allow us to find the gems, find the innovations that can truly deliver resilience benefits for communities. So we already made 16 investments to date across 7 markets in Africa and 9 adaptation sectors. And this was after reviewing over 3,000 pitch decks and swifting through, the new ideas that innovators are coming up with on the continent. So, for example, we invested in an incredible company called Centigreen in Morocco. They are startups that's turning deserts into arable land, basically supporting farmers to adopt agroforestry practices that restore soils, and also building desalination plants that are modular and lower cost that can extract brackish water from the soils, and then connecting that to drip irrigation systems that can travel farther on the plantations. So their plan is to transform at least 10,000 hectares by 2030 into arable land. But we also invested in digital solution platforms like Asoraf in Senegal, which is a microinsurance product for underserved customers that includes disaster insurance against climate risks, be it floods or be other natural hazards that will only increase in countries like Senegal. And it's affordable, it's accessible, it's appropriate for users, and delivered in a way that actually will encourage adoption, which is a huge issue when we think about insurance. And the way, as I mentioned, we support these companies after 7 years operating on the continent as an accelerator, it is based on the fundamental belief that capital is only one side of the equation. So alongside capital, we roll up our sleeves, and our team of venture builders provides tailored and hands-on venture building support to really help founders achieve product market fit. So we essentially become the interim CTOs, the chief marketing officers, the head of sales, the head of operations, like the early stage companies can't afford. And we jump in with the right support at the right time that can really increase the chances of success of a young company. And in fact, their past portfolios have nearly 90% survival rate, which is really wildly above the global average for early stage companies, which stands at less than 50%. So over the next 4 years, we plan to roll up our sleeves and work with 40 African startups across the continent, generating both impact and returns for our investors. And our goal is to make at least 20 million lives more resilient to climate change. We also target change in terms of hectares of land restored, carbon emissions mitigated, liters of water conserved, and integrated a strong gender lens across our work, targeting 40% women founders in the portfolio, because women are really at the forefront of developing a lot of the solutions that we're seeing against climate change impacts in communities. And as Vikram mentioned, we have successfully reached our first close, but we're still raising a $40 million fund. And to date, we're at about $9 million with a fantastic set of investors that were the first backers. But we have many ways for investors to engage in our blended finance fund, which includes a first loss philanthropic tranche to mitigate downside risk, a junior tranche for concessional investors, and also senior equity tranche for commercial investors. We're also raising grants for a sidecar ecosystem building facility to facilitate knowledge exchange and community building around climate resilience, innovation, and action in Africa. So if any of you have questions or comments or thoughts or want to help and be part of the journey, please do reach out after this call. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maëlys. This is great. And look, we already have a question, and I love this question because this was something that struck me also. So it's from Maria Sierra. And I guess the question is, what do you hope your impact will be on developing an adaptation asset class? And I think adaptation, at least the services and tech part of it, right? I mean, the implementation and delivery of adaptation infrastructure is a different story. So what do you hope? You're in the pre-seed stage. We have had other lab instruments who are in sort of a little more developed, past the value of death stage. But we'd all love to hear what you think the impact could be.
Well, our hope is that we really are going to generate a lot of enthusiasm and excitement to invest in climate adaptation solutions, because while immense efforts are needed to stay below 1.5 degrees, the chances are, and it's already happening, that these impacts are already affecting communities, are already changing the way people need to think about their work, their lives, the way that they consume, the way that they plan or mitigate risks in the short term. And I fundamentally believe that this is an asset class that will grow, that can generate returns, that necessitates private investments and not just grant and not just government funding. So our hope is to showcase a range of solutions across all these sectors and show how a climate smart adaptation lens has to be integrated for businesses to thrive in the future. And I think that's true in Africa, but it's true everywhere in the world.
Africa in particular, right? And your focus on, sort of essentially investing at home for solutions that are going to be needed within the continent is fantastic. Which sort of leads me to perhaps one last question for you. And then, of course, if there are others, we can do it in the chat. You mentioned, and I noted this, the concept of venture building, right? And what are the benefits you're seeing from your approach, your venture building approach, and the support you provide for it? And where do you see encountering challenges, or maybe you already have encountered some?
The key benefit we see is to really become this extension of startups teams, right? In the early days of building a company, and again, I experienced this myself firsthand, you need to wear so many hats, make so many decisions, and the chances you're going to make a mistake are really high. And you also don't have the resources to get to the proof points that investors want to see. So you find yourself in this chicken and egg situation where investors want proof point, you need resources and a team to get there and run experiments to see what works. And yet you don't have them because you haven't achieved the proof point yet, right? So you're kind of caught into this catch-22 issue. So that's what we do for companies. We become that extension of the team. We become those resources and the time that we invest. And it's really valuable after also working with 60 plus companies to make sure to guide the development of new products, new business models in the right direction. What we have learned, though, is that it does take time, dedication, context. Not every business is one size fits all. So it was very important that it was truly bespoke, truly hands-on by a team of full-time, experts working with the companies and not just advisors.
That's fantastic. Lots of hard work done, lots of hard work to go. Good luck with the rest of the fundraising. This is great. Thank you again, Melis, and back to you, Barbara.
Great. Thank you so much, Melis. And again, I do want to just pull out one point that you said, which makes me very happy, because again, I think at the lab, we've been trying to focus on that, but your work on helping together with others that have also come out from the lab cohort, but also from other accelerators, just to demonstrate that adaptation can become an asset class and that can generate returns, I think is so important. And I hope that everyone who's listening here is just really kind of embracing that point, because I think this is something we need to focus on even more so. So thanks so much for all the work. And yes, let's dive into our next instrument now. And it's my pleasure to welcome Daniel Goldfarb, who is the Executive Chairman and Co-founder at Lendable, who will introduce us to the Lendable Decarbonization Fund. And he will explain a little bit better how sustainable linked loan solutions can help small and medium-sized enterprises decarbonize. So the floor is yours, Daniel.
Thank you, Barbara. As mentioned, I'm Daniel, co-founder of Lendable and executive chairman. And a little bit on Lendable. So Lendable was founded in 2014 with the mission of creating a more equitable and sustainable world through the marriage of data and finance. And you'll hear me talk about this across this presentation, how we marry data systems, proprietary data systems, with finance, and in our case, debt. To date, we've deployed over $450 million, and we currently have over $325 million of AUM in our financial inclusion strategies, which we've been doing since 2014. We've raised 4 funds. Our last fund of those 4 funds was a blended finance vehicle with over 7 DFIs, a very large insurance company as the anchor investor. We have 37 employees all across the globe. We have offices in London, Nairobi, Singapore, Argentina, and the US. And over our over 8 years of financing, we've reached over 3.2 million individuals and MSMEs with our financial products, whether those were MSMEs through our blended finance vehicle or individuals through some of our earlier funds. If you go to the next slide. So this fund strategy is born out of something we've seen every day in our markets, which is that the majority of future emissions, globally speaking, will come from non-OECD countries, so the countries that Lendable works in and has offices in. At the same time, as we all know, the minority of capital is flowing to these countries. In particular, what Lendable's observed is that the private sector is receiving a vast minority of this capital. So SMEs and MMEs will make up over 50% of the emissions in non-OECD countries. Yet the majority of capital we're seeing flowing into those countries of this 30% is actually going to governments and large corporates. So we have a huge mismatch between the private sector enterprises that will make up the majority of emissions and access to capital in the way that they need it. We go to the next slide. So the Lendable Decarbonization Fund is focused on fixing this problem. It's taking the tried and true products that are already in the market, so concepts behind sustainability-linked loans, and scaling them down so that they can, those concepts so that they can reach SMEs and MMEs, middle market enterprises, to help them achieve lower emissions and to increase the resilience of the private sector in emerging markets. The fund is going to have 2 sub-funds within it. So the main fund is the Sustainability-Linked Loan Fund. That'll be a blended finance vehicle that will provide debt that will be commercially priced to SMEs and middle market enterprises to help them decarbonize their industries. We will also have a repayable grant facility that will provide technical assistance that I'll explain a little more. Both of these vehicles will invest in the exact same verticals, which are transportation, energy, and agriculture. Why these? We believe these verticals in emerging markets not only make up more than 50% of emissions, but in the private sector have the highest opportunity to decarbonize. Just a few examples of the subsectors that we're going to be investing in transportation, two-wheeler, three-wheeler, four-wheeler electrification, as well as efficiency in logistics and distribution, in energy, everything from clean cooking to residential solar to commercial solar, as well as on the demand side, reduction of demand, which we think is a very important part of this equation. And then on agriculture, we'll be looking at everything from production, so sustainable agriculture, inputs, resilient insurance packages, as well as the food side, so distribution of food, food waste, refrigeration, all that. If you go to the next slide, one of the things that Lendable can do that we think is unique and interesting in the market is we're trying to take structures that historically have been very expensive. So sustainability-linked loans, green bonds are very expensive structures to do, especially in an emerging market context. And one of the things that we think we have the ability to do is take our technology Maestro and reduce the cost of measurement, verification, and the administration of the step down of the sustainability linked loans. So we've done this before. We play this role on a sustainability linked loan that Standard Bank arranged for Mkopa, where we are the verification agent on that. And just to provide an example, what does this mean? What would it look like? In the transportation sector, I think there's a really tangible example, which is for two-wheelers, electrification. When you think about how you would track emissions for this, there's actually some incredibly granular automatable ways of doing this. So if you're able to get GPS-based data, charge and discharge data from the batteries, then you have real-time access to the data that's required to look at emissions reduction of the portfolio from the bottom up in a granular way. By automating that, you're able to administer the KPI-based step downs, and you can do this across a number of the different sectors we're looking at. In terms of the impacts that we're aiming to have, this is a fund that is very much focused on emissions reduction, as the name of the fund indicates. So SDG 13 is the primary SDG we are focusing on. There will be a significant minority of transactions that will have a resilience angle, especially in the sustainable agriculture space. But as a fund manager that has been managing financial inclusion funds for the last 8 years, we also recognize that to have a just transition, to have a distribution of benefits from decarbonization, we must also take into consideration sustainable development and inclusive development. And in particular, I wanted to call out one of the co-benefits that we are very focused on, which is SDG 5. We are building out a framework such that in the step downs for the sustainability linked loans, for every single loan, we won't just have emissions reduction or resilience KPIs. We will also have gender-based KPIs that will achieve interest rate step downs. So we're very focused on these co-benefits as well. Again, that is something we've done in our financial inclusion funds and have experience with. From a fundraising perspective and go-to-market perspective, the first 3 boxes here are the sustainability linked loan fund, the main fund. It's going to be a 3-tranche fund. We are raising $150 million of senior notes. These are very targeted at commercial investors, fixed income, fixed term, senior debt with significant subordination. So at a minimum, 40% subordination. We're then going to be raising $75 million of B shares from DFIs and corporates that will provide additional buffer on top of the first loss and a commercial return. And then the C shares, which will be first loss, will provide the buffer, the catalytic buffer that allows us to raise the additional capital. As I mentioned, we've raised blended finance vehicles before with this same structure in Luxembourg. And we're very happy to say that some of our previous investors and previous funds have decided to seed this fund with a C share. So we have soft circled about $15 to $20 million of first loss which as a firm we've never had before going into a fundraise, that quantum of first loss that we believe will allow us to raise the additional capital, the commercial capital to this fund. And that will be closing in Q1 2024. And the last piece of this is the Carbon Project Preparation Facility. This is a repayable grant facility aimed at ensuring that we can subsidize the cost of clean energy technology, as well as sustainable agriculture technology, to those that can least afford it. So low-income populations and excluded populations through high-integrity carbon credits. So subsidizing access to goods and services to those who cannot afford it otherwise through high-integrity carbon credits. This will provide repayable grants to local companies to be able to introduce those subsidies through the introduction of carbon credits. If you have any questions, we're very happy to answer.
Great. Thank you so much, Daniel. A very good overview. And again, I think very exciting to have this focus on SMEs and MMEs, which we all know is very, a lot of action needs to happen. So it's great to see how you're addressing that. We already have a question for you from Fernando Hermoso, who's asking how you will make sure that SMEs will have the capacity to report the impacts of their activities. Certainly, I think this whole question is around the monitoring and verification. And so this one, he has another question, but let's get started with this one first.
Great. Yeah, across all four of the funds that we've ran to date, we require, these are all Article 9, well, our most recent fund since Article 9 came out, SFDR funds. And we have a significant number of DFIs, as I mentioned. So we're very used to the reporting, impact reporting, and the challenges it causes. But we've done something I think unique here, which is we've automated as much of it as we can. So on the portfolio side, we integrate with every borrower we've ever lent to. So we're able to automate portfolio-based impact reporting to some degree. We then have created digital-based reporting solutions for our borrowers that we're rolling out additions to right now that allow our borrowers to report via a digital platform so that we're able to get year-on-year analysis and able to do on the portfolio basis comparisons of what we see in their data versus what's self-reported. So we've done a lot of work to try to streamline this, and I have a lot of experience with it. We will be lending to larger SMEs. So the average loan size in this fund to start will be about 5 million, but over time will go up to about 15 million, 10 to 15 million. So these are larger SMEs. These aren't kind of the smallest SMEs.
Super helpful. And I'm afraid we're at time, but if you could also answer to the other questions in the chat, that would be great. And I see a few other questions. We will be having the slide decks from everyone, this recording here up on our website. So everyone will be able to kind of listen and look at the details again. And also I see some questions and comments around kind of expanding the work from our kind of lab cohort to other geographies. We certainly are very, much welcoming, expanding the network and making sure we replicate some of these instruments and funds and facilities in other geographies. I think we have had a very kind of strong focus on more emerging economies and least developed economies in this round. But again, that doesn't mean we don't want those ideas to be replicated, and we'll be happy to share more on the opportunities here. But with that, thanks so much again, Daniel, and let me hand back to Vikram.
Well said, Barbara. Thank you. And thank you, Daniel. I mean, hopefully the magic of data collection, collation, and analysis is going to advance the whole agenda on being able to lend to this target population. So great. All the best with that. And now on to the last idea of the day, which comes from our Brazil regional program. It's the low carbon agriculture transition mechanism. And to tell us more about how this mechanism is going to accelerate climate transition in agriculture in the Brazil's, the various biomes of the Amazon, Cerrado, and the Atlantic forest, we have Martha Dessa, the co-founder and CEO at Vert Capital. Martha, over to you.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Okay. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm really excited to talk a little bit more about the low carbon agriculture transition mechanism. We've been financing the agri sector for a decade in Brazil through capital markets and those instruments. So I think this is version 2.0 of the last 10 years. and I'm really excited to talk a little bit more about this. Please next. So just a background here, we are talking about Vox, a leading and pioneer in impact investment in Latin America with over $200 million of assets under management. And Vert, which I'm a co-founder, we started in 2016. We have today a team of 160 people. We've issued almost 300 deals and $10 billion across those deals. And we are a founding signatory of IFAC, which is an initiative called Innovative Finance for Amazon, Cerrado, and Chaco. Please next. So just a quick background. We are 3 female founders at Vert with a team. And from Vox side, Gilberto and Daniel Brandão are leading the project. Please next. So why version 2.0 right now? So we think that we need to address the global growing demand for food and at the same time protecting the environment and the planet. So to be very clear, what we thought was how can we feed the world without chopping a tree? And that's where Brazil can play a key role. So we have more than 100 million hectares of degraded pasture land in Brazil, which is equivalent to Germany and Spain together. Please next. When we were studying the programs, and if this is so obvious, so we need to do this, we looked at the alternatives, and what we found out is that it was not happening at the pace needed and at the size needed, because we need to combine different tools. So the average farmer is willing to transition. And this is a combination of a long-term credit line with technical assistance and what we are calling here an income guarantee. So it's a de-risking facility, of course, with impact management. When we have all this together, then we create a no-brainer decision from the farmer's perspective. So the small and medium are willing to transition. Next, please. We identified 4 different verticals that we want to tackle. And those are pasture recovery, sustainable livestock management, integrated systems, and agroforestry and bioeconomy. We will always be working with corporates, and their role is to be on the ground to help originate and scale the programs. And at the same time, the risk, it's a credit enhancement tool because they have the commercial relationship. So being on the ground, being off takers, monitoring, collecting, it's really key here. And these are the players we are already working on with or are in conversations with. Next, please. So we are currently in the pilot phase. We have already done our first pilot in pasture recovery, and we are in a work in progress on bioeconomy with Natura. And next step would be a $100 million revolving debt fund with senior and first loss concessional capital. And then the scale-up fund when we'll start phasing out concessional capital as we have more track record. And our experience is that the very diversified portfolio has a default rate of about 2%. So that's where we want to target. Next, please. As I mentioned, we are looking at 4 main sustainable development goals, and we are not considering carbons as a revenue stream for the moment, but we really believe there is a huge potential of soil carbon, and this can be an important kicker in terms of concessional capital total return. Please, next. So pasture recovery, as I mentioned, is done. We've issued about $5 million. It was a blended finance instrument. The company was held in the first loss tranche, and we raised locally with Brazilian commercial investors the senior tranche. With bioeconomy and Natura, we are working in another blended finance instrument, and this is already being fundraised. We're in almost launching phase. We expect this to happen by the end of November. And the following pilot should be on sustainable livestock management, and we expect this for the first semester of next year. And then if all those pilots work well, we'll put everyone together, meaning that we'll have more diversified portfolio, and then we can scale more rapidly with also international vehicles that can be facilitated with international investors coming in. As I mentioned, we are currently finalizing the Natura deal, but we expect to have a scale-up phase of the pasture recovery deal, and this is expected at $20 million. It will be also the company in the first loss tranche at the beginning, and then when we scale, we'll have other investors coming in. We'll have another $15 million of agroforestry and bioeconomy, with companies that we already mapped that are in the space of the Amazon cooperatives as well. And then the sustainable livestock management also expected to be at $20 million. So thank you very much, and please feel free to ask the questions you might have.
Great. Thank you so much, Martha. And I think we have a question. I'm reading this as we I'm trying to digest it. It's from Ratnika Prasad from the Nature Conservancy. And she says, the idea of a transition guaranteed income is quite interesting and innovative within a blended finance structure. At a high level, how are you thinking about the scale and duration of this guaranteed income portion in relation to the scale and duration of the loans themselves?
Perfect. So we expect this to be around 5 to 10% of the total amount of the fund. And this is only when there is an opportunity cost. So in order to transition, the farmer needs to reduce his current income. But if it's an expansion, for example, or if there is no current income happening from the specific farm, he's not eligible. So we'll be finding who's eligible or not at its inception. Already with the help of the technical assistance company when they have their baselines measured. So the format is kind of a sidecar, but really simple. It's an escrow account where we'll have this amount of money, and then it will be the operational part very similar to what is an insurance claim.
Okay, that we'll see if there's any follow-up, but that sort of made sense to me. And let me ask you an unrelated question that is to this question, and that is about the way you're sort of allocating resources into the different verticals that you talked about. Agriculture and cattle-related activities seem to be the bulk of what you're doing, and that's great, but there's also obviously that's the primary focus of a lot of other activity as well. But do you think you may allocate more to the bioeconomy, sort of the agroforestry bioeconomy stream? Because at least from my limited engagement in this sector, it seems that is under sort of represented or is not usual focus, so which is very interesting in your case.
Actually, it's not that we want to focus last, it's just the average ticket. So in terms of how many farmers we will reach, it will be maybe 70 to 90% of the total quantity in terms of numbers of farmers that will be impacted. It will be on exactly this vertical. But when you see about tickets, crops, grains, and cattle are bigger. So the 100 million hectares that I mentioned are really huge. And when we see, for example, we are working this Natura deal for a year right now, we expect to impact 500 farmers, and it will be a $5 million deal. So that's the difference.
So it's not a question of impact. The impact is fairly well distributed. It's just the amount of money that gets deployed for the same amount of effort. And so that is challenging. That's fantastic. Thank you, Martha. I think we are pretty much out of time right now. So I wish you all the best. This is great. It's wonderful to see a women-led organization appropriately ensuring that the world gets fed. So good luck. And I'll turn it over to Barbara now to close us out. Thank you again.
Thank you very much.
Great. Thanks so much, Martha. And yes, we are almost out of time, but we wanted to thank you all for your interest in this year's class of lab entrepreneurs. I think today showed you the exciting cohort we've been supporting, focusing really on the harder geographies, the harder sectors, and we've managed to see lots of funding already, but we need more. So please help us demonstrate that we can move from intention to delivery. Each team has shared their contact information, so please reach out to them directly if you're interested. We also, as you just saw, launching a Zoom ball to gauge interest. We really would appreciate if you could take a moment to respond if you'd like to learn more about one or more of today's instruments. And believe me, they're all eager to hear from you. And after going through the lab process, they are all ready to hit the road and the ground running and implement these ideas. So you can find additional information, slides, and a recording on the lab's website, including the contact information for each team. I think we're supposed to share the link in the chat right now again. And just, I think, as a final message, the lab's 2024 call for ideas is now open for all climate finance innovators out there. And the 2024 lab cycle will be very special, as we will be celebrating the lab's 10th anniversary while developing 10 new climate finance solutions, which will be the largest lab cohort ever. And we're very excited about that. The lab's next cycle brings important news, such as the launch of 2 new regional programs, one in Latin America and the Caribbean, and another one in the Philippines. And this means that the lab now has 5 regional programs, adding to the consolidated regional programs in Brazil, India, and East and Southern Africa. We also took on the challenge of launching a new thematic stream focusing on high integrity forests, seeking financial solutions to mobilize private capital for their protection and for sustainable management. The other thematic streams that are returning for our 2024 cohort include adaptation, climate adaptation, and agriculture and food systems, all where we certainly need more work. And as always, the lab will also reserve a spot for the best mitigation idea that does not fit into any of the previous specific themes and regions that I mentioned. So information about all our regional programs, thematic streams, and the submission process is available on our lab website. The link, you can see it also on the screen here. We will also host 4 online informational sessions for applicants. So check out our website for the dates and registration. And with that, let me just thank you all so much for being with us today. Let me thank my amazing team who has put this together and supported the lab over the last years and into the next years. And a huge thanks to you, to Vikram, for being with us here today. Fantastic. Great. Well, I think that's it for the lab demo day. Just make sure you follow the lab and subscribe to our newsletter to get the latest and greatest on climate finance innovation. And thank you all, and see you next time. Have a great day or end of your day wherever you are.